It's good to have you guys tonight. My name is Andrew Lopez. I am the current chairman of the Canadian County Republican Party, and I'm excited for the forum that we're going to have tonight. I appreciate the candidates coming. They're all right here in the first row. I'm going to introduce them here in a little bit. Yeah, give them a hand. We appreciate them running. First order of business, if you have a cell phone, take it out. Okay? You got your smartphone with you. Go ahead and take it out. If you have not joined the Canadian County Republican Party page, join it right now. And on Facebook, and then turn your ringer off. Okay. First order of business is prayer. We're going to have Robert Mitchner step up, do the prayer.
Thanks, Andrew. Stand with me, please, if you're comfortable in doing that. Let's pray together. Our Father in heaven, we come together, and I want to thank you richly for the blessings that you shower upon our nation and upon our community at large, the Oklahoma City metro area. Thank you for those who are leading in it, who have stepped up with the courage and the time and the sacrifice to lead, and those who aspire to do that. We'd ask that you enter their hearts. Father, may they and we always hear your guidance and your wisdom in the decisions that we make. We ask a blessing on this gathering, especially tonight. May we be civil, and we ask for an attitude of discussion and civility. And we thank you again, Father, for being with us. May we always hear your guidance. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Okay, and we got Representative John Paul Jordan in the room right here. We got our State Chairman Pam Pollard in the back right here. Hey, Pam, thanks for coming. Let's see, Brian Baumgarten, he's, what'd you say your title was again? New Political Director at the State GOP. We've got Mark Hader, he's one of our county commissioners here in Canadian County. Yeah. Any other elected officials that I'm missing? Okay, all right, good. All right. Tonight, I wanted to kind of set the tone for what we're doing here tonight. The idea, if you couldn't guess, is just to learn about you guys. In Canadian County, we believe it's important for the voters to know who you are, to better choose their candidate. And so we wanted to do that early to give people more opportunity to make a better decision. And if you guys didn't see it, let me just pass this out here. This is our Canadian County platform. You guys have already gotten it, and these guys, I've emailed it to them. But if you want to just pass that around the room, it's our statement of beliefs here in the Canadian County. And we are doing a new thing. It's called the Candidate Platform, or the Platform Review Initiative. And that's where I give the state platform and the county platform to the candidates and ask them to review it and get it back to us saying what they agree with. And if they don't agree with one of the principles, they say why they don't agree with it or how they see it differently. And that's another way that we can let the voters know this is what this candidate believes, and it may fit well into how you see things. And so that's the purpose behind that. I wanted to read the preamble to our platform. It says, the Canadian County Republican Party states in principle that we believe in the God-given equality and sovereignty of the individual. And we grant no power to government that would create any privileged class or individual. And that the proper role of government extends no further than securing the sovereignty of the individual by the consent of the governed. And so the purpose of government being to defend your rights and your sovereignty as a person. And we could get into a heated discussion tonight about how government has violated those rights and overstepped its boundaries, but we're going to let the candidates get into that tonight. Here in Canadian County, we do not apologize for our Republican beliefs. We promote them. That's part of what we're doing tonight, and that's why I'm handing you the platform, so you know what this party believes. It is our stated mission to end political corruption in the state of Oklahoma. And that's a lofty goal, but if you're going to get to the moon, you got to shoot for the stars. And that's why we stated that. I was told yesterday by a candidate in a conversation I was having with him that, and it's not in this race, I'm not quoting you guys, it's another race that he's in, but he was talking to a consultant that he might use, and the consultant actually told him, look, If you just say these things, to get elected, then you can do whatever you want when you get in. You laugh. But I'm recounting to you something that happened. And what I'm telling you is that the conspiracy is real. Because he may not have hired that consultant, but that consultant may have been hired by someone else. And that's concerning. And this is why we're here tonight. Because we want to hear directly from your mouths what you believe. We want to cut out the middleman. We've seen enough literature. Everyone's pro-life. Everyone's for small government. We want to know what that means in your mind. So right now I'm going to introduce John Michener. He is so graciously accepted the opportunity to be our moderator tonight. I'm looking forward to what he's going to do. I've been able to sit in at Mama Rojas when he does this. He's actually the current president of the Oklahoma Conservative Political Action Committee, and he's the director of Oklahomans United for Life. This method that he uses for interviewing candidates I've found to be very effective, and that's why I'm excited for him to be here tonight. If you want to attend his meetings, they happen at Mama Rojas over on it's the Lake Hefner Expressway over at noon every Wednesday. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
We are going to give the candidates 4 minutes to say anything they want to say. That it is 4 minutes. Put the microphone right on your chin so you sound like the voice of God, so the people at the hearing aids in the back can hear you. That would be great. And so I'll be sitting right here, and I will give you the finger for 1 minute when you have 1 minute left, and then we will cut you off at 4 minutes. So say anything you want. Pretend you're on our doorstep. Tell us your points and develop them, and that would be great. After that, we're going to take them all up here, and we're going to ask them questions about the party platform, about principles, about ideas. And then you will take turns answering those questions. So we'll just have the microphone there. You can pass it back and forth amongst yourselves. I have some dominoes over here, and I put each candidate's name on a domino. So my assistant, not Vanna White, will be shuffling them up, and every time we do a question, it's just going to be random who has to answer first, just to make it fair. So Kyle, if you'll shuffle the dominoes and pick a name, and we'll give the first candidate 4 minutes to talk to us. And it's Matthew Hamrick. Come on up. You're the next contestant on the candidate forum. Don't trip on the cord.
So first off, let me apologize if I'm a little hard to hear, getting over a sinus infection. So if I am hard to hear, please don't feel afraid to tell me to speak up. My name's Matthew Hamrick. I'm 36 years old. Was a family of an Air Force man, so grew up around the world. However, from my mother's side, we have deep roots in Oklahoma. Her side of the family comes from Prague and Payton. Very small town farmers. It was a difficult decision to decide to run, mostly because I've lived as a private man, very private man. I value very much the ability to keep to myself. I value the ability for you to keep to yourself. That is something that I want to ensure that you maintain, that ability to keep from government overreach into your private lives. But beyond that, I want to work to maintain a more modernized government in the fact that we need more efficiency so that services that are provided by government are done so in a more effective and efficient manner. It costs less to do so. Our budget in this state has grown exponentially, and we need to see that it gets curtailed and brought back down. Not only through the cut of programs, but also in those programs that are provided, they need to be done at the cheapest possible level. The reason I know that there's so much waste is because I do live in the government system. I have worked for the state government for the past 10 years. That experience has been one of difficulty. I have a knowledge of where in the system we can make changes so that the government operations as they exist today can be modernized, get the roadblocks out of the way, and allow for a more efficient system. I also happen to serve on the board for the statewide virtual charter school board. That board authorizes statewide charter schools in a virtual setting, and that also is another passion of mine, which is education reform. I wish to see that all families and children have access to effective education in this state, and that they have the choice to access the education that they wish to access and not be required by the state to access a one-size-fits-all model, because one size definitely does not fit all. But that's a brief synopsis of why I've chosen to run, and I thank you for your time.
All right, our next candidate is Dwayne Smith.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. I recognize a few faces that I've knocked doors on. And, you know, I'm not a career politician, but I do want to tell you a story about my first door knock that I had in Mustang. I walked up, and if you think door knocking's easy, it's definitely out of your comfort zone. Knocked on the door. First thing was the dog started barking. The baby started crying. There was a shuffle around, and I think the dog's name was Dammit. The door opens, and I'm sitting here wanting to give out Brian Walters' campaign. No, just kidding. And so that was my first door, and but you know what a benefit it's been to go be able to knock doors. What great people. It's given me really, in my heart, hope about our government and our state and our society and our nation about the future. A little bit about my background. I spent 32 years at the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. I was executive director of the board for about 12 years. I spent 10 months then in 2010 in Afghanistan with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And my primary job there was to work with the Army and the State Department and the ministries of Afghanistan to put teams of people together to work on power, transportation, and water infrastructure in Afghanistan. So some of those big projects, you know, putting power at Kandahar, putting hydropower at Kajikai Dam to supply that. And I really want to talk a little bit about one of the lessons that I learned there that I believe is so important in this race. We at the Corps of Engineers went and put a water well in for a community. And this water well was replacing a well that was so high in nitrates that 1 out of 5 children was dying every year because of the poor quality water. So when we went in and drilled this new well, we thought that this is going to solve the problems of this community. And the well kept getting vandalized. And it ended up, the reason was that the women that were going to get the water, in Afghanistan it's a bad lot if you're a woman, right? Fair enough? The women had to go get the water and haul the water back. But this was the way that they got their voice out and heard community news amongst the tribes in Afghanistan. And so we thought we were correcting the water problem. What we were doing was interrupting a very needed social network in Afghanistan. And I bring that story up because listening to people on the doorstep is the most critical, I think, thing that we can do as a candidate is listen to the folks that are actually paying the taxes and voting. So I was also a Division I basketball referee, worked in the Big 12, the Western Athletic Conference, traveled around doing that. So I have a lot of sports analogies. I'm a big sports fan and have sports analogies to go with that. At this point in time in our state legislature, I think the critical skill set is a person that has demonstrated experience in dealing with different stakeholder groups. We've got to deal with agriculture. We've got to deal with cities. We've got to deal with economic development professionals. We've got to deal with the whole gamut of citizens across our state, not just in our district, to accomplish the goals that we want to accomplish. So I look forward to talking more about details of what I plan to do. Again, and I also thank the candidates. It takes a lot of time and effort to do this, and we certainly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Brian Walters.
Well, I'd like to say thank you for coming out. It's an incredibly hot evening, and for you guys to get out and come out and spend your time to engage in the electoral process. If we had more folks like this, we may not be in the situation that we are at the national and state levels. My name is Brian Walters, and obviously I'm a candidate for the Senate District 45 seat. And a little bit about myself. I'm an Oklahoman. I was born and raised here. I have two amazing children. I have a son that just turned 18 and a daughter that's 14. Have an amazing wife. And the three of them hold me accountable. They hold me accountable to be not only a great father and husband, but just a great person. Hopefully, if everything works out the way that we plan it and I get to be your next state senator and have that honor, you guys will fall into that and you'll hold me accountable as well. I feel like that the way that government begins to get better is when the citizens hold their elected officials accountable, and I expect that. My phone number's on my material, and that phone number's been the same phone number's been for 20 years. It won't change, and so you're welcome to call me anytime, either during the campaign or afterwards. Like I said, family born and raised here. I grew up in a family that we had a small business. We actually had an optical business. My dad started it in probably 1980. And at that time in the 80s, as some of you may remember, it was not the best time to be starting a business or trying to survive. It was high interest rates and poor economy. He successfully started that business and operated that business until he passed away in 2015. I had the opportunity and the privilege to not only grow up in that business, but go to work with him many days and learn a lot about what it takes to make something succeed, what it takes to deal with people. It was obviously a customer-facing business, and that was one of the best things, was to hear customers and solve customer problems, which is not unlike what an elected official is supposed to do. I also have the privilege right now of owning my own small business, and getting that off the ground is obviously a challenge, but it's exciting at the same time. In between those two events, I've had the opportunity to direct the accounting and finance operations of companies in the energy and farming industries. Some of those companies exceeding $100 million in revenue. I graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a degree in finance and accounting, and am currently in the process of completing the CPA exam. I believe that right now, with the problems that we're facing in our state, especially with the budget, we don't need same old, same old. We need somebody who can step in, who actually has a skill set that is lacking at the Capitol. And if you look at the backgrounds of the folks that are at the Capitol currently, there's very few of them that have a background similar to mine. I believe that my background is unique. I believe I'm uniquely qualified to step into that role on day one and not only represent, you, but also the interest of our neighbors, those that may or may not be engaged. I would really like the privilege of honor and the honor of representing all of you at the state capitol. When I'm making decisions, I'm going to be thinking about, Bob with one O in the back. I don't know where he went, but I met him earlier, Bob with one O. And I'm going to be thinking about Bob with one O and what his dinner table feels like, because I know my family has gone through challenges, and I'm not going to be one of these folks that step into government and become an elitist. I'm going to be the one that's making decisions thinking about my family sitting around the dinner table, your family sitting around the dinner table, and the neighbors that we have sitting around the dinner table and what challenges that they may face.
There's no surprise, but Scott Harris is next. You're the last domino to fall.
I was beginning to think I didn't have a domino in there, but Like I said, my name is Scott Harris. Let me tell you a little bit about my history. I grew up in northwest Oklahoma. I call it the armpit of Oklahoma. Where I grew up, if you know where Woodward is, most people know. So it's a small town just east of there, a farming community. But I came down here for school. Once I came down here, I couldn't go back up there. So I graduated from OU with a degree in entrepreneurship. After that, honestly, the timing of getting out of undergrad, weren't a lot of jobs available, so I figured I'll do the next best thing and go to law school. Little did I know when I got out of law school, it was even worse. But so got out of law school, immediately started my own law firm. I couldn't envision going working in one of the towers down there and just, they call them desk jockeys, just sitting there in front of a computer. My wife was pregnant, and so I know all about that stress of having a real tight budget. The first year, I think I made $15,000 with a new one, so we definitely know how to pinch pennies. And that's kind of one of the reasons I'm in this is, you see all of this, what's the best way to put this? You see the budget and how they're constantly fighting over it. One of the things, when I went up there to watch them actually, in the JCAB, actually, arguing over the budget, there was I think it was called the swag bill. I think JP may know about it. They're arguing over cutting $26 million, and we're talking about not having tote bags. I mean, and they couldn't get that done, which was extremely frustrating. I left that night just thinking, that's it, I'm running. I mean, I think the proper role of government is let's figure out, let's pick our core things that we want government to provide and focus in on those, make sure those are provided for first, and then everything else in the periphery, we can get to that. I mean, it seems like we tend to have these outlying issues that we're fighting over when we need to focus on right now is the budget. I've got 4 young kids. That's kind of what spurred me on to do this, is instead of just sitting back, just wondering what's going to happen at the state capitol, I want to actually go there and actually tell my kids, I tried. I felt a call to do this. I tried it, and I stuck to my guns when I was up there. One of the things I told my wife when I first decided to run for this was, you know what, I'm not just going to go out there and I think John handed on it, is just say the things I need to say to get elected. I want to say exactly what I think, so that way, if I am elected, you know exactly what you're getting. If it's something that you don't agree with, at least I can come back to you and say, I told you in my campaign, this is what I'm doing. Okay, 1 minute left. But yeah, like I said, my main focus, besides the budget, it's also going to be on schools. My oldest is 7, so we've got another 25 years of being in Oklahoma school systems. So that's one of my main focuses. I've got a brother and a mom who are both school teachers. What has really disappointed me in the past is we pass all of these compromises, liquor by the drink, lottery, to raise money for education. And it raises money for education, but they take the other money away. So my focus is let's fund that properly and put the mechanisms in there to make sure that when we raise money by one instrument, we're not just offsetting that by taking it and putting that offsetting amount in another account for something else. I think that's good. All right.
Perfect timing. Thank you so much. All right, at this time I'd like to invite the candidates up to these seats. There is no fire under the seats, so if they begin to feel hot, that's just because of the topics. So everybody come on up there. What I've done is I've put the questions up on slides so that everyone in the room can see the question, so that the candidates can see the question, and we will all be seeing them, except for me, for the first time together. Here's a microphone. We'll do the domino system again, and you can just pass them back and forth. Now, again, this is about what are you going to do once you get elected, not just what you believe. So I am framing each question along that line. What are you going to do? So for the purposes of the questions, you're going to hear this phrase in many of the questions, I would. So everyone, when you hear that phrase in the question, I would, what does that mean? It means that if you are elected, you would author a bill, or co-author a bill, or vote for the bill that would accomplish that end. That's what that means. But I don't have to spell that out every time, so that's what it means when you hear I would. Now, for the sake of time, because there's so many things to cover, I have done my very best to take these questions and make them just like when you were in school. We're going to have true, false, yes, no, A, B, C, and D. That way you can answer quickly. And if everyone answers the same way, goodness, we'll just move on to the next question. If there's a lot of variance, or if people are hem-hawing around and you don't know what you think, I may back up and give each of you 60 seconds to further develop what you want to say on that point. So that's how it's going to work. We have the dominoes shuffled. Our first question for everyone is this: should there be a correlation between civil law and moral standards? This is a simple yes or no question. Matthew Hamrick.
Yes.
And you can just pass it down.
Yes, if I understand that question right.
Yes.
Yes, because if there wasn't, then we
No,
would have flavor.
if you say something, they all have to say something.
But they can say anything they want to. So I'll answer
No,
the,
you
I'll
have to
answer
say
the
yes
question.
or no. No, next
Yes.
question.
Yes, there is a correlation between moral law and civil law.
Now, if the
Moral and
candidates
civil
would
law.
like something else to be said on this question, you can nod your head, and I'll say it. Okay, we're moving on. Next question. Regarding gun laws, I would A, reduce existing restrictions, B, keep the current laws, C, add new restrictions, or D, remove all restrictions on gun laws. What is your position? Brian Walters.
I'd probably go A, reduce existing restrictions.
A as well, reduce.
A.
A.
Next question. Oh, this is great. We're ahead of schedule. I would raise state income or corporate tax rates if needed to balance the budget, yes or no? Dwayne Smith.
Only as a last resort.
So that's a yes. Matthew Hamrick.
No.
Brian Walters.
No.
And Scott Harris.
Heck no.
Okay, so we have yes and no, no, heck no. Does anybody want further development, or do you guys want to say more on that? I can keep going, or I can give you 60 seconds each.
I would like 60 seconds.
Okay, 60 seconds, go.
Efficiency in state government is paramount, and the budget funding core government functions has to be funded. So we prioritize those priorities like education, as an example. What the legislature is telling us this year is that there were other priorities higher than education. So have those priorities, identify those priorities, and fund those priorities with a broad-based tax structure that is very thin as possible, to fund those activities.
Hey, just pass it around.
My thoughts on the thing is, we need to see why we're going to have to raise those, or why we need that extra income. Whatever's causing that, I think if you're going to raise a tax, you put it on that directly. One of the things that kind of comes to mind is like the cigarette tax they were considering. Those people tax our health system a lot more than non-smokers, so I think that's an appropriate way to raise revenue on a situation.
With the way the budget negotiations went this year and in the previous years, and the amount of one-time funding that we've seen, I don't believe that there's an actual need for income and corporate tax hikes. What I believe is that there's a need to evaluate the programs and the performance of those programs and the efficiencies that are inefficiencies that are existent in state government. Having worked in procurement, purchasing, and government operations for the last 10 years, there's way too much waste that's being spent in the operation of government, and then in those programs that are ineffective and inefficient, to justify actually increasing those taxes.
in my opinion, we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending and priority problem. If you think about it on a smaller scale, maybe you own a business, maybe it's just your household budget. What happens when your expenses exceed your revenue? You can't just say, oh, I want more revenue. Now, you could go work harder, you could work longer hours, but generally speaking, being able to just change your revenue stream on a dime just because you have an appetite for spending is very difficult to do. So we should approach it like I do, like my business does, like my family does, like your family, your business, whatever the case may be. And that is that you maximize and you pare down and you make sure your money is going to the things that are a priority. And then, you can evaluate it from there. But that's where you start. You don't start by just saying, hey, I'm just going to go raise taxes because it's the easy thing to do to plug the hole.
All right, we are on to the next question, which is, I would issue bonds if needed to balance the budget even without the consent of the people. Brian Walters, yes or no?
No, but I would like 60 seconds.
No.
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 Okay, all of these candidates are on record as saying they would not issue bonds if needed to balance the budget. They will not do it. I'd just like to point out that the last 2 years in a row, the legislature has passed tens of millions of bonds to balance the budget. Brian, 60 seconds.
The challenging thing with bond expenditures, if you think about it, and the reason why I'm not supporting, bonds to balance the budget is because bonds are paid back over 10 or 20 years. And if you take that money that is paid back over 10 or 20 years and you consume it today, at some point that has to be paid back. That is a death spiral. You get into that kind of thinking, and that is a death spiral at some point, which is kind of akin to what the federal government is doing, that at some point all of your money is going to be going to servicing bond debt. And at that point, then you've hit a crisis that's unrecoverable. So that is why my answer would be no.
Very similar response. It's kind of like in your own household if you use a credit card to buy a refrigerator. Now you're paying interest on that refrigerator, so the refrigerator costs more. You're paying it out over a long period of time. That has to be paid back. You do that every single year, well, then all of your budget is being, a significant portion of your budget then is paying the interest on that refrigerator that's wearing out. And then when we have a downturn in our economy, all of a sudden, the only solution then is to raise taxes or sell more bonds, and it just exacerbates the problem.
I'm really just going to echo what these guys said. I mean, it's the right thing. It's just like credit card debt. I've handled bankruptcies. I filed them on behalf of my clients before, and one of the questions when you ask them when you're looking at their credit card debt is, what'd you purchase with that? And I've yet to have one that could tell me exactly what they purchased with all of it. It was just, I bought something 7 or 8 years ago. I'm pretty sure I don't have it anymore. And I feel the same way with our state government. If we put the debt out now, 10 years down the road, we're not even remember what we passed that bond for.
So, bonds to balance the budget, absolutely not. There are appropriate times in which you may have a capital outlay where you need or want a bond for, but that should definitely be something that the people make a decision on, not something to merely balance a spending problem.
All right, good answers, everyone. We appreciate this. We just want, one of you is going to get elected, and when you get there, there will be a lot of pressure on you to borrow money. And they may even justify and say, oh, well, it's for this museum or this hotel or this parking lot or whatever. But again, they took money from some other place in the budget, and it's part of the package, and you end up voting on it, yes or no. For everyone in the audience and for you, I'd also just like to point out that that is unlawful. This is the Oklahoma Constitution, Article 10, about debt, and it says you actually can't pass debt. No such law will take effect without a majority of all the votes of the people at a general election, a major election. So they violate that routinely, and we hope you will stand your ground on that when elected. Next question. This is regarding abortion. I would remove existing restrictions, keep the current laws, add new restrictions, or abolish abortion. And the first person to answer is Scott Harris.
I would definitely do D. Can we come back with 60 seconds? I feel like this is a question we're all going to want to spend 60 seconds on.
C.
C.
I'll just say that life begins at conception, and there's no justification for taking innocent life.
Stop. I'm going to take the microphone away from you if you keep doing this. A, B, C, or D?
C. Excuse me, D.
Okay, we got 2 Ds and 2 Cs. This is good. For those of you keeping score at home, let's see. Paul Racino is not here tonight, but I did get a chance to visit with him on my front porch, and his answer would be B, keep the current laws. Dr. Diane Means, I talked to her on my front porch. Her answer is also B, keep the current laws. So we have a lot of difference here among the candidates. So now it's time for 60 seconds each. Domino flips over. Oh, Brian Walters, you get to go first.
As I was trying to say, that life begins,
You were right.
life begins at conception, and there's no justification for taking innocent life.
I also believe life begins at conception. And one of the biggest blessings in my life was my son. I adopted my son when he was 3 months old. Picked him up off an airplane seat in Chicago, and I want to use this Senate seat to make it easier for families to adopt children. I think that's a big part of understanding how, when women particularly and parents go through this issue of abortion or not to have an abortion or what, there are options out there for them to pursue that give tremendous blessings to other people. And I'm certainly a beneficiary of that, and that's a major piece that I would like to support.
Like I said, my answer is D on this, but I also want to put a call of action out to, I would assume most people in here belong to a church, as our church needs to be there to support these women who currently are seeking abortions. I think that's something where a lot of churches have fallen flat. So it's easy to say let's abolish it, but we've also got to take care of the problem take care of the issue on the other end. You can't just say, I want to abolish it, but see you later. You've got to step up and put action behind that.
So my answer reflects more so the idea that I don't want to put mothers or potential mothers that would make a stressful decision in a position there where they might be imprisoned or anything like that. More so, I wish we would have more discussion on working on the hearts and minds, and more discussion on alleviating those situations that are creating the thought that abortion would even be an answer. Because absolutely, as everyone else has said, life begins at conception, and that life has its rights to life as well.
Okay, I want each of you, I'm going to give you each another 30 seconds. And here's what I want you to be thinking about. Again, this is about what you would do. What will you author? What will you co-author? What will you vote for? Because one of you said I would add new restrictions. Two of you said I want to abolish abortion. For those keeping score at home, Diane Means said she wanted to keep the status quo. We did dive into that. She said, I don't want to author anything. I don't want to change anything. I want to keep abortion available. So her literature says pro-life, and that means she wants people to choose life. She wants them to have that choice. That's pro-choice. Paul Racino said, yes, I want to keep abortion legal. I think parents, in the case of rape and incest, and even parents who do not want to raise a special needs child should have that option. So right out here next to Mustang Town Hall, we have a place called Brittany's Play Adventure. It's a playground for handicapped kids. There won't be any kids to play on it if we elect people like Paul Racino. So I've given you some time to think. I'll give you each another 30 seconds. What kind of legislation are you going to propose? And the first one would be Dwayne Smith.
I don't know that I would propose legislation, but I would certainly support legislation that makes it only in very clear, certain circumstances that would be legal, and that would be the health of the mother. I believe rape, incest, I think those are types of things that deserve consideration. Doesn't mean that I support that, but I also think that there's conditions around that family that should be considered. So I would be for restrictions that make it very clear, very concise, and very limited on what that would be.
All right, if you'd pass the microphone to Brian Walters.
You know, one of the things that I try to avoid is answering hypotheticals, because there's a myriad of different nuances that could be there, and it does go south. I think I was very clear. There's no justification for taking a human life, and that's where I'm going to stand on it.
Okay, pass it on down to Scott.
I would definitely vote for it. I'm not sure whether I'd author a bill or not, and here's my reason behind that. It has nothing to do with my pro-life stance. Right now, the restrictions are placed on the federal level. So it's one of those things. I feel like Texas is also trying to do the same things we are. Once they get something passed, I've told my constituents, I'll be the first one to copy and paste that thing and get it on the floor.
Time. Matt?
So I think that's something where I'm along in the same manner. We've spent quite a bit of money trying to fight legal battles that have been kicked out. I'd like to be able to see in a conglomeration with other states the ability to get something that would pass that would defeat some of the federal regulation right now.
All right, thank you all for staying within your time. I'll just make one more quick comment, then we'll move on. There are people enjoying pot in many states across the union, and they're not being prosecuted, even though they're in violation of federal law. The one thing we haven't tried in Oklahoma yet on abortion is telling the feds to take a hike and abolishing it here. And that won't happen unless somebody runs a bill to clean up our law and pass it. So hope you'll think about doing that. Next question is, what is the single guys means one, what is the single most important reform you will seek to implement to produce a larger number of better educated graduates from government high schools? Matthew Hamrick. You'll have 60 seconds and just talk about the single most important reform.
Most important reform would be giving more control to the student and family in determining what it is that they're seeking out of their education. Right now we have too much government interference into what it is that the curriculum is based on. Would like to see more options of what it is that becomes a graduate, and allowing for more access into those fields in which students would like to see their careers turn into, rather than being told that they have to meet a certain narrow-scoped curriculum.
Dwayne Smith.
I think the single most important thing, I believe, and what I'm hearing on the doorstep, is that we have to recruit, pay, and keep our good teachers. As our teachers are leaving Oklahoma, going to Texas, at this point in time, I think the single most important issue is our teachers and pushing our dollars to the classroom. That does not mean increased taxes. That means priority in government spending.
Brian?
You know, this is a complicated subject, and I'm not sure that a single reform is going to do it. I would answer it this way, that I believe that competition breeds success. I believe that the school choice for the families so that they can choose whatever works in their best interest. And there's a myriad of different things. But regardless of where that student is in the state, that they have options, that that student can look and become equipped to compete, not only with the kids that are within their circle, but also with kids from other states and other countries, that they are equipped to compete for any job in any industry that they may want to choose. So whatever it takes to create competition that forces the schools to have high standards and to really push their students is what I would promote. My son, he did a lot better whenever I challenged him than if I don't challenge him. He steps up. Kids will step up if we put the expectations there and create an environment for their success.
Scott.
Mine is probably a little bit more radical, and I know that's a cuss word in here, so but I'd like to see more of a focus on more of your ability level teaching. So what that would be, instead of grouping kids by age, so 7-year-olds or first graders, that if you've got a kid at the third grade reading level, they're with third graders. If they're only at first grade in math, kind of more of a where is your ability at? And on top of that, one of the things I'd like to see is, I went to a small school, and so we didn't have the best guidance counselors. But my thinking is if kids are still struggling, let's get these kids in a technical school, and say, it's okay not to go to college. College isn't for everybody. And so, just saying that's your one track is finish high school and go to college. I think that's a disservice to some of our students.
Wow, that was exciting. 4 very different answers. Change the curriculum, send more money to teachers, give parents choice, and radical grouping by skills. Good stuff. Okay, the next question is, I would connect education dollars to students rather than to government school districts. Yes or no? Only? No commentary? Dwayne Smith?
Yes.
Brian? Scott?
Can I have 60 seconds on this one?
Scott, yes or no? Connect money to the kids rather than the schools?
No, but.
Matt?
Yes.
Okay, you're the lone wolf. We'll let you go first.
Well, I don't know that that's a focus that we need to be focused on right now, but when I say that is, where do we draw that line at? Where do we draw somebody who doesn't have a kid in the school system, their portion that's going to schools? Where does that money go? That's going to be, where do you draw that line at? Or if you have your kid in private school, under that you would want the money to go to the private school. But the private schools I've talked to, they're a little weary of that because they're afraid of more state oversight. So,
Let's go to Matt.
So, yes, and I believe that what Mr. Harris is talking to, as far as government oversight on the private side, there are certain nuances that would definitely need to be addressed with any bill. There are nuances that would need to be addressed with any bill that would alter the funding formulas, but most certainly would rather see the students whom that funding is the public good for the student more so than the district follow that student.
Dwayne?
I believe it's a crisis for our teachers now. The number one thing that I hear and I believe is that our teachers are leaving. They're leaving for the retirement age teachers are going to Texas and getting another retirement. There's not enough pay. It's unconscionable, I think, for us to go through the last 3 legislative sessions and have our legislature tell us that that's not a high enough priority. So, as I said, the number one issue, this kind of follows my line of thought on that, is that we have to make sure that our teachers, that we're recruiting good teachers, we're paying our good teachers, and that our teachers then are teaching our kids.
Again, super complicated issue. I would say generally, directionally, that Currently, the school system is a monopoly. Monopolies do not breed innovation. They do not breed competition. You attach the money to, and I mean, I understood the point, but the money that I'm spending tax dollars wise, attach my money to where my kids go. That money is naturally going to gravitate, because I want what's in the best interest of my kids. That money is going to naturally gravitate towards the best option. If the public schools become the best option, then that's where the money will go, and they won't have to worry about it.
All right, that's it. I want to back up and just put the previous question up for a second about the most important thing we could do to reform. The point is not that everybody gets a good retirement and everybody gets paid well and everybody has this and everybody. The point is, how do we get better educated graduates out of school? That's what we have to think about. And I do want teachers to be paid well, but if giving them an extra $5,000 per year, are we saying that they're all of a sudden going to teach better because we gave them more money? Why are the kids doing so poorly now with the money they're being paid now? I mean, that's why we're asking this question. It's about the students. They're the priority. All right, next question is regarding vaccination. Again, answer A, B, C, or D. Regarding vaccination, I would never mandate vaccinations. Mandate vaccinations for government school participation only. Mandate vaccinations when there is a compelling state interest or public health emergency. Or D, mandate vaccinations for any reason. And the domino says, Scott Harris, you answer first.
I'm going to go with C.
Dwayne Smith.
C.
Matthew Hamrick.
C.
A.
All right. Does anybody want 60 seconds, or do we move along? All right. Next question. Regarding civil asset forfeiture, I would A, make it easier for law enforcement, B, keep the current laws, C, make it harder for law enforcement, D, change the beneficiary to the state, or E, ban the practice. Answering first, Dwayne Smith.
Probably A.
Scott Harris.
Can I do C with a D?
Okay, he's a C to a D. Matthew Hamrick.
I like the C to C almost to an E.
Wow, now we're talking musical notes here. Brian.
I'll go A through E so I can cover everybody. No, I would say B, and I would like time if we have it.
All right, so that was all over the board. Why don't I give you, was 30 seconds enough, or you want 60 seconds? All right, I'm going to give you 60 seconds with like a 30-second warning. And the first one to go will be Scott Harris.
Well, I definitely make it harder, and I've actually, as an attorney, I've fought civil asset forfeiture cases. The thing with that is, I'd have to just give an example of one. I had a client who had $4,000 in his back pocket, and yes, they found drugs in his vehicle, but we had a receipt from the bank where he withdrew the money 10 minutes, like he was less than a mile away, and it took him, I think, about 6 months to get half of his money back. So I believe they at least need to put it where there is at least a charged case before you can even start the process. A lot of times they'll start the process while these guys are still locked up, and they don't even know what's going on with their stuff. So, and
Brian Walters, you're next.
I know this was a hot topic. My belief is that government is supposed to protect life, liberty, and property. It's that person's property until they are convicted. At that point, then it's probably eligible depending on the case. The reason why I kind of had an if is that, I'm an analytical guy. I love data, and while there may be one anecdotal case that happened, I want to see the evidence, the overwhelming evidence that there's a problem before we start messing with it.
Matthew Hamrick.
So the reason I gave my answer the way I did, I believe that it would be proper to retain for the payment of prosecuting a case if you can prove beyond any reasonable doubt or show that truly those assets were truly utilized in the carrying out of crimes. But I don't believe that we should also create any kind of benefit to the state in which the state or the county sheriffs or any other government official sees a benefit of wanting to aggressively take assets from any citizen.
Mr. Smith?
I think an example that Scott brought up about something that takes 6 months, I think we're all opposed to that type of situation. The flip side of it is, though, that our police officers have a very difficult job. And there's crime. The crime is advancing. How people now are advancing in criminal acts. Talking to the chief of police here in Mustang. I mean, just the things that they deal with. I want to make sure that they have everything in their power to enforce laws and do the right thing for our public safety as well.
All right, very good. So if the government doesn't have a right to take our lives without due process, we believe they shouldn't be able to take our property without due process either, because it's an extension of who we are. And of course, the Constitution explains we even think the purpose of government is to defend life, liberty, and property. Backing up, I'm sorry for you, those of you keeping score, backing up to the vaccination question, I did get to ask Diane Means her opinion on that, and she refused to go on record. She said, I'm not taking a stand on that issue. And then, of course, this is a Senate seat we're running for, and it was Senator Yin who wanted to remove religious and philosophical exemptions from mandates. So I said, what if you're on his committee? Will you vote for his bill to remove exemptions? And she said, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I won't take a stand. So you might want to put down Rhino in that box, in my opinion. Not that I'm supposed to take an opinion as the moderator. Next question. We've had a lot of talk about core functions of government. It turns out that when you press politicians on that question, everything is a core function of government because they won't cut anything. They only raise taxes. So we want you to name your top 3 core functions of state government. Only 3, guys. You cannot go beyond 3. And this list is just my ideas to help get your brain going and thinking. You might think of something off this list. This is one of your top 3 core functions of government. I'm vamping here to give you time to think because I know this is you have to think a little bit about this one. So please give me your top 3 core functions of government. Matthew Hamrick.
So quickly running down your list, I would say law enforcement. Sorry. Quickly running through the list, looking at this list, I would say law enforcement, roads and highways, and courts and prisons.
Brian Walters.
You said you do want us to hold to this list, or we can give you...
No, you can go off the list, but you can only say 3.
Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and provide for the common defense.
Scott Harris.
Education, roads and highways, courts and prisons.
And Dwayne Smith.
Yeah, education, and I would say infrastructure. Roads and highways is certainly a big part of that, but so is water and wastewater and other types of things, and then law enforcement.
Okay. Now we're going to stay on the same question and ask you to think a little bit harder. Which of these are improper functions of state government? And again, if it doesn't have to be off the list. If there are other things that you think are clearly improper functions of state government, we want you to tell us what does state government need to get out of doing. So I'm giving you a few extra seconds to think about that. Not proper function. Now we're not even talking core function. Like this is not something the state should even be doing at all. And the first person will be Matthew Hamrick. And you're not limited to 3.
Oh, there's so many. But for the sake of brevity, public TV and radio, the arts, and let's see, lodges and resorts.
Brian Walters.
Bottom three, I'd say public TV and radio, the arts, and I would say lodges and resorts.
Scott Harris.
Definitely lodges, resorts, public TV and radio. I'd want to also say even grants to cities. I could keep going on this list, but I don't want to name.
No, keep going.
Three.
You're doing good.
Childcare. I'd say mass transit. I'm going to stop there before I get in trouble. So.
Dwayne Smith.
Lodges and resorts, clearly those lose money anyway. The arts, public TV and radio, and I kind of agree. Child care sends a question mark to me about what the government role in that is.
All right, we're on to the next question. Okay, imagine, oh boy, just imagine that you are given the opportunity to make only one policy change. You got a magic bullet. It's going to happen. You can do it. You can use it. You can make the change to grow the economy. Which would you choose? Only one. You can cut income taxes, or you can eliminate sales tax on groceries, or you could increase state incentives to startup companies in booming industries. You can only pick one. Scott Harris.
B.
Eliminate sales tax on groceries. Brian Walters.
B.
Matthew Hamrick.
B.
Dwayne Smith.
B.
Okay, all of you failed the question. I'm sorry. Start over. I don't know how to handle this. I've never had 4 people botch this one before. Really, you want to create economic growth. You want prosperity. How is trimming off a few cents of everybody's groceries going to create prosperity in the economy? Okay, we're going to go to the next question, I think, and while I think about how to chastise you for that and get a better answer out of you. Next, I would create a tax credit, deduction, or exemption for certain participants in a particular industry to spur economic growth. Yes or no? Scott Harris.
Can I ask for a clarification on that, or just based on the way I read it?
Okay, well, a state tax credit, deduction, or exemption is where the state decides that a person or an entity is going to get a benefit.
My only question is, when you say certain participants, are you talking about certain companies within that industry, or are you talking about...
Well, obviously, if the state decides it's going to give a tax credit, deduction, or exemption, there has to be some way to apply for it and be qualified for it, so it's only going to be certain participants that get it in that industry, right? So would you do that to spur economic growth?
No.
Matthew Hamrick.
No.
Dwayne Smith.
Yes.
Brian.
No.
Okay, we got some yeses and nos. I'll give you each a minute to talk about this point. Mr. Smith.
Incentives for economic growth it's a double-edged sword, and when we start giving like the past wind credits, you know, that money going out of state, the legislature did the right thing this last year to do away with those. When we give incentives to business that's going to grow business and bring jobs and revenues to the state, then I'm for those types of opportunities to do so. I think that I don't think any single legislator is going to have the expertise to be able to evaluate each one of those. So I am for some process by which those incentives would go through, not just a special interest saying that, but a process to go through before those would ever be approved.
Brian Walters.
Well, he is right. There's not many legislatures that can do that. On the other hand, I think that I probably have the background to be able to to assess that. For me, being a state senator, being your next state senator, it's not my job to pick winners or losers. If there's a tax credit that is good for one business in one industry, then my guess is that may spur growth in everything, so maybe we should look at it for everybody. I'm not going to be picking winners and losers. I don't want somebody to have a hand up or an unfair advantage in the economy. My family business, we've never had a tax credit or an economic incentive. Our incentive was to bust our butt. That was our incentive. My incentive was my kids. My incentive was my family. So, if that's not good enough, then, we have to really evaluate what our priorities are.
Scott?
My issue with it is I've never seen a study showing how an incentive has helped, whereas if that incentive would not have been in place, would that growth have already occurred? Would it have occurred naturally through the private sector? So until we can actually show how each incentive would actually work, I'm not for it. I want to know that if we don't pass it, will this happen or will it not? And if we do, that's the purpose of it, not just to spur growth in one industry. We want to see it.
Matthew Hamrick?
So providing some credit or exemption from a tax in order to so-called spur growth, that won't, again, sitting there and picking and choosing who gets a benefit, who doesn't. It really should be a free market and allowing the market to decide who wins, who loses, what parts of industry are worthy of existing and which ones need to fold.
All right, we're going to continue on this theme, dive a little bit deeper now with this question. Regarding strategies of economic development, which ones would you expand? These are just some that the state are involved in now. I haven't listed all of them, obviously. You may know more than I do. Some of you sound pretty business savvy. But regarding strategies of economic development, please tell us which ones you would expand. Dwayne Smith. You're just naming strategies now. Don't get into explanations yet. Dwayne Smith.
Public-private business is one. Some examples of the Quality Jobs Act being successful. And certainly I would decrease regulation, not expand regulation.
Okay. Scott Harris. Which strategies would you use more of?
If I had to pick one, I would do tax incremental financing. I'll go into that explanation later if we need it.
Anything else? Okay, Matthew Hamrick.
I don't see anything that I would really prefer to expand.
All right, let's flip the... Oh, Brian Walters, sorry. Have you answered already?
That's my answer.
Okay, let me go to the next question. So regarding strategies of economic development, which ones would you eliminate? We asked you what you would use. Now what would you absolutely not use, and do you want to eliminate? Dwayne Smith.
Well, I would decrease regulation. I think that is one that is certainly there.
Brian Walters.
Did you say you want one?
No, pick all kinds of stuff off the list if you want to.
I would say subsidies to industry and state-provided commercial real estate. Probably the top two.
Scott Harris.
I'd have to agree with him. Subsidies to industry, state-provided commercial real estate, reduce regulations, look at reducing taxes.
Matthew Hamrick.
Yeah, so eliminating subsidies to industry, state-provided commercial real estate, reducing the regulations.
Can't believe you all didn't jump all over eliminating taxes, licensing, and so forth. Tourism improvement districts, really? Okay. Quality Jobs Act has been given a nod once or twice. With the Quality Jobs Act, we are all helping to pay the salaries of loves of Thunder basketball players, all kinds of stuff that I really don't want to support. And through that act, businesses are competing sometimes with their own corporate tax dollars are being used against them. It's fundamentally unfair. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Do state agencies have the legal authority to ignore mandates from the Environmental Protection Agency? Simple yes or no. Dwayne Walters.
You guys both want the mic at the same time?
Did I? Oh, sorry. It was my domino man over here. Brian
It was
Walters.
him saying he was passing out my literature is what got it, wasn't it? I don't know. I don't know if they have the legal authority, honestly. I would tend to say, yes, they probably do.
Matthew Hamrick.
No.
Scott Harris.
Can I give you the lawyer answer of it depends?
I think you have to pick one.
Well, the legal authority,
Yeah, do state agencies
right.
have that authority?
I'm going to go with yes, qualified answer.
And Dwayne Smith.
Yes, but I just want to comment about the question. When you say mandates from EPA, that can mean a lot of different things from EPA, I think. So with that caveat, I would say, yes, they do have the ability to ignore mandates.
Did any of you want to comment or just go to the next question?
I would like to comment.
Okay, go ahead.
The EPA, the overreach of regulation with EPA, that's not a statutory requirement of EPA, it's rule-driven, is a major economic hindrance toward business in Oklahoma. And when you start reaching out and having farmers have to get permits from EPA to do typical farm work, raising wheat or whatever, we've got an overreach of EPA. This is where Scott Pruitt's going in, and people criticize him for not being for the environment. It's not about that. It's about the regulation being appropriate for protecting what we have.
Anyone else want to comment? Well, the reason I asked the question is because the EPA is an unconstitutional agency. It has no authority to exist, so I'm not sure what authority the mandates have. We'll continue on this theme with the next question. How should the Oklahoma legislature, which is where you want to go, how should that body respond to any federal action, whether it's Congress, President, or a court, that is immoral or unconstitutional? How should our legislature respond? Just be thinking about that. I am going to give you up to 60 seconds to answer this question because it's a bit of a challenge. But you talk about a problem. We don't just have rogue courts. We have rogue everything in Washington, D.C. It is very hard to find constitutional legitimacy in so much of what comes from the president, the Congress, and the courts. So what will you do about it or try to do about it in the Senate? What is your responsibility, what we try to do, and how will you respond to something that's immoral or unconstitutional? The first domino is Matthew Hamrick.
So, first, would seek to ensure that we're both passing resolutions that would state that Oklahoma sees those actions as immoral and unconstitutional, find ways to enact state laws that would rebuff those actions, and if need be, fight those actions in a legal court system in order to ensure that the Oklahoma citizens are not affected by those laws.
Scott Harris.
Well, if it's unconstitutional, I believe the state should refuse to obey it based on their state's rights. I mean, if it's not outlined in the Constitution, then that's our that power is given to us, and so If it's unconstitutional, I'm assuming it's an overreach, and so disobey it.
Dwayne Smith.
If it's unconstitutional, then we ought to simply ignore it. If assuming that a court has said it's unconstitutional or whatever that case may be. But there's a review in place. I think looking at how we appoint judges for the future, looking at I think that is a process that deserves some review. I also think that as Oklahoma, we ought to seek our Attorney General for review of opinions that would come down from the court, get legal opinions on that to see what direction we should go and follow those.
Anybody that runs the gauntlet of running for office and is successful, they have a very good handle on what got them there, what the values of their constituents are, and frankly what the values of Oklahoma, the citizens of Oklahoma are. And I feel like it's our responsibility that when we get to the legislature, when I get there, not to forget that. It's so easy when you get to that situation to fall into kind of this mindset of, I know what's better for everybody else. You know what the values are, and whether it's immoral or unconstitutional, the legislature needs to be willing to stand up for the values of Oklahoma. And if that means a fight, then you go ahead and fight. Sometimes it doesn't come to that, obviously, but I think we need to fight for our values, fight for what makes us Oklahoma, and be proud of that.
Was that everybody? It's almost my bedtime. I want to back up a little bit. The question before said, what does a state agency do? Can they ignore something? There is a difference between the executive function and the legislative function. Executives can either carry something out or not carry it out. They're the ones that can do the ignoring. The legislative branch decides what the law is in Oklahoma. So if there's something immoral or unconstitutional being forced on us by another jurisdiction in the legislature, I like what a couple of you said. You talked about passing resolutions, making it clear that you don't have to obey this. And the other thing that would be important is passing measures to protect the citizens if they disobey. And so that's something you will have to lead in and you will have to do. You can't just sit back and wait for some lawyer to tell you something or the court to work it out. You need to make it clear to the people that they don't have to obey this and you'll protect them. I think that might be it. Let me see. Nope. Judicial reform. Regarding the Oklahoma Supreme Court, what would you do, if anything, about them? Keep the current court status or impose term limits on the justices, maybe subject the justices to partisan elections like you guys are doing right now, or reduce the number of justices? You can do that constitutionally. Change the appointment process. You might choose more than one on this list, but tell me how you would handle the Oklahoma Supreme Court. Brian Walters.
Gosh, I would say that C might be a possibility.
Scott Harris. He said C. Let's have him be elected.
I'm going to stick with A. That's what I know.
Leave it alone. Okay. Dwayne Smith.
I like B.
Term limits. Matthew Hamrick.
I would say E.
Change the appointment process. Do you all want to, I think we have time maybe to give you half a minute on that if you'd like to, or you can just shake your head no. They all look blank. We're going to move on. It is late. Okay, that was my last question. I hope all of that was helpful to you. I'm going to take about 10 minutes now and take questions from the audience because I only put 10 things on this report card and there's other things you might care about. So I got one right here. Who's next? I've got one. I've got two. Who's next? And three.
Quick yes or no for all four. If you were in the last legislative session, would you have voted for the $1.50 tax increase on cigarettes?
Yes.
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 I would say no because of the process that it happened to get there. I don't feel like that the process was done correctly.
So, hold on. Maybe do you guys want to clarify? Are you saying you would vote no on that because they passed it as a fee instead of a tax, but you'd vote yes if they did it as a tax before the last 5 days of session?
I will say hypotheticals, but
Okay.
we would not have done it the way they did.
So in theory, everyone's a yes. Okay, next question.
In reference to education, what's the chance of you voting down and get rid of some of the extra school districts? And we have what, 500 consolidation of school districts, and we have 500 and some of them in the state of Oklahoma, as many as the state of Texas has. Would that help to do it?
Would you mandate school district consolidation, yes or no, Scott Harris?
I would do it. I would look at models from other states that have, I kind of favor the one superintendent per county type of administration. I think that's where you could get some savings.
Brian Walters?
My opinion is there's no sacred cows when you're looking at a budgeting problem, just like you would in a business. You look at everything that's on the table, and so my opinion is that you look at that as a possibility and everything else.
The question was, would you consolidate school districts? We were trying to keep it to a yes or no.
The answer is that might be a possibility with a lot of other items to. It's not a one-shot.
Okay, yes,
correction.
maybe. Dwayne Smith.
Yes, maybe.
Absolutely.
I want to go back to the $1.50 cigarette tax. I've been working in the healthcare industry for about 40 years, and I can tell you that overweight people actually cost the system many more dollars than smokers. So that being said, wouldn't it make more sense to just tax fatties? We would get a lot more money, and we would be helping them. They would be in better health. They should perhaps weigh at the supermarket and you pay proportionately for how much you're overweight. I'm not sure, but that kind of follows that same thinking. And how do you think about that? Would that be a yes or a no?
We're going to consider that a snarky education comment for you all. Thank you very much.
I want to go back to a question that was asked during your questions. I want to know, just like a quick 20-second answer, why'd you say yes on, for those of you who said yes on the tax, that you would eliminate tax for groceries? What was that, your just answer, your shot?
Okay, to refresh your memories, the question was, how do you spur economic growth? And they all wanted to spur economic growth by cutting taxes on groceries. I'll give you each 30 seconds to comment on that. Matthew Hamrick, you go first.
Because the question was a hypothetical for a magic bullet, and there was no answer that I saw that really led us to any place that was going to be an answer that got you the answer to the question.
Brian Walters.
It was the only answer that had eliminate in there, and I also believe that it's probably one of the largest expenditures that families make. Freeing up that money, they're going to spend it somewhere else in the economy. So I think it's a win-win across the board.
Scott Harris.
I'd actually have to echo that. And the thing with groceries is that's the one thing that I think it hurts our poor more than it hurts our well-to-do. I mean, everybody has to buy groceries. There's no way to avoid that tax if it's in place.
And Dwayne Smith.
And again, that's really where I'm at too. It's taking money and giving it back to people that need it the most, and they will spend that money on other things, and that would provide growth. But there are many things that should be considered.
Who's got the next question? I'm going to take one more from the audience and then turn it back to Andrew Lopez. You got a question, Mark? Okay, Mark's going to be our last question, County Commissioner. But first, let me go to this sales tax on groceries. Who are you to decide who needs the money? It's our money, and all taxation is theft. Because if I don't pay it to the marble pork pen at 23rd and Lincoln, I will get in trouble. There'll be a lien on my house. I'll go to jail. My credit will be wrecked. You're stealing from me. It's my property. It's their property. Who decides what poor is? Who decides what middle class is? Who decides what rich is? Give us our money back. And a little bit of tax on groceries does not create economic prosperity and wealth, especially when you give it back to poor people who spend it on cigarettes and Dr. Pepper and donuts. Taxes, corporate taxes, sales taxes, income taxes. take thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars from business owners and entrepreneurs and people who use it to sell products that people want and employ people and make the economy grow. That's the question. How do you grow everyone's wealth? Give them their money back so they can invest it. Groceries. Give us our property back. That's the right answer. Mark, last question.
All right. When it came down to the last couple of weeks and they were scrambling to pass this budget this year, almost everyone that is in that legislature has been in your shoes, and they have probably been asked, what are the core functions of government, for example? And I happen to build and maintain roads and bridges, and I agree with you guys. I think every one of you had roads and bridges as an example, as a priority. So when it came down to it, though, virtually all these people who have run and said the same things you guys have end up funding, holding education harmless, actually giving them a little bit of an increase, and then Health and Human Services, DHS, all the social programs that virtually none of you said were a priority end up getting held harmless. And they cut dollars for roads and bridges, and they didn't, I think they cut some from courts and things like the corrections. So what's going to be different for you guys when one of you gets elected, for example, and you've received some campaign donations now from the lobbyists, and you get threats from other industries saying, we'll put $150,000 in a campaign to get you out of office. How are we going to know that you guys are going to stand firm and hold roads and bridges or courts and those kind of things as a priority?
What was the question?
How are they going to? How can we trust you that you'll be different than all the other people who have promised things?
How can we trust you to be different? Okay, so here's what we'll do with that question. How about I give each of you, random from the dominoes, 60 seconds to make a closing comment and talk about why we should trust you. And then that'll be the end of our time. I'll turn it back over to Andrew. So 60 seconds to say whatever you want. And then after you're done with your 60 seconds, you can come back down and sit down. Your seats should be cool off after that. We're going to start with Matthew Hamrick.
So for the last 10 years, I've spent my time each day going to work, trying to ensure that the state agencies that I work for are spending their money in the most efficient and the most appropriate ways possible. Every day I come home wanting to ensure that I look at my neighbors, that I look at my wife, that I look at my accounts, and I say that the tax dollars that I spent were spent well today. That's what I want to ensure that I do on your behalf if you choose to have me as your state senator. That's the difference that I see, because I've been responsible for state dollars going out of state agencies, because I've been doing that work, and I absolutely know what the state laws and the state rules are. And I can walk in day one and say, these are the things that we need to cut out. These are the areas in which we have a gross amount of waste. And these are the areas in which we're creating a gross amount of time that's costing the state. Thank you.
Scott Harris.
I'm going to try to answer your question pretty directly. Like I said in my opening statement, it comes down to what are the core functions and making sure that those are what we're focusing our dollars on first. Make sure those are taken care of. One of the things that didn't make sense when you said roads and bridges, especially roads and bridges, when we take money away from there, you may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, don't we get $4 in federal money for every dollar we spent in matching funds? Somewhere in that neighborhood. So since that's a core function, I think that needs to be properly funded so we get that. On top of that, you asked, what if a lobbyist comes up to you and says, I'm going to put $150,000 in the opponent? Great. If I don't win, I'll go back to work. I mean, I'm not scared of running my own business. So,
Dwayne Smith.
This is, I really want to make a point here, because I believe that the skill set that's necessary to go to the legislature now is one that isn't because we've had a good career. It's demonstrated experience in working with different people and groups and interest groups coming to common solutions. So as a county commissioner, you deal with agriculture folks, you deal with city folks, you deal with industry folks, you deal with economic development people. That skill set of being able to work with them and come up with solution is what our legislature has not done. We have Republicans that can't get along with Republicans now. We have our Republicans in the legislature blaming the budget deficit on 3 people. And to me, what that means is we don't have people there with the skill set to be able to draw consensus from a wide background of people. And it's not just in Senate District 45. In order to be successful, we are going to have to go to other senators around the state and gain consensus.
I think your question was not who's the best compromiser. The question was who's going to stand up for the principles that they go in with and come out with. I'm the only one in the field that has a proven track record of doing just that, and I'm proud of it. I'm much more concerned about the guy that I shave with and what my family thinks than necessarily getting reelected. If you go in thinking about getting reelected, you're always going to compromise. Do you have to get people to the table and talk about issues? Yes, you do. But there's a certain baseline of your core values that are uncompromising that are going to be with you long after you leave office. John keeps asking us, he keeps telling us what the right answer to the question is. The question you have before you is who is your next state senator? The right answer is Brian Walters.
Please
I
give
thought
them all a
Wayne
hand.
Smith. We're going to disagree on that.
Please give them all a hand for sitting on the hot seat.
Good to see you.